The Bo Bassett Sweepstakes have reopened. Penn State, Oklahoma State, and a new third school are all in the mix. Now, I got to imagine that Penn State is the leader here, but part of that has to do with the fact that Oklahoma State might not even need him.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are locked on to college wrestling in this crossover episode. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Cody Stovall, the host of Locked On Oklahoma State. So we're getting two of the three sides here, two of the three perspectives to talk about Bo Bassett and everything that has unfolded here with his decommitment from Iowa. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Thank you to the Everydayers for making us a part of your regular routine. We are your daily source for all things Penn State and Oklahoma State sports. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section as we are talking about the Bo Bassett Sweepstakes. Penn State, are they the favorite? Does Oklahoma State make a push? How realistic is it? We're also going to give our thoughts on Iowa as what all happened here. Allegedly, we're going to share our thoughts on it. And then an outlook for Penn State and Oklahoma State going into this upcoming season, early outlook for them, starting with Bo Bassett. Penn State, well, Bo Bassett's in Pennsylvania, so that certainly helps here. But Cody, I want to get your take initially because I do think Penn State is the leader at this point in time. It is easier for Cale Sanderson to go and visit and meet with the Bassett family. David Taylor has to hop on the private jet to make all of this happen, at least in person anyway.
Right.
But I also get the sense that, Oklahoma State's not necessarily worried if they don't land him, even though they would like to.
Yeah, man, if you've been watching what Jax Forrest and even D. Lockett have been doing this offseason, essentially, we don't really have a lot of concerns from a roster perspective coming up. But at the same point in time, it's not about Bo, in my personal opinion. Bo is a phenomenal wrestler. He's going to do great anywhere he goes, and he's going to be great for any university he lands at. But, and we've talked about this previously, I think that it's more about Melvin Miller and the younger Bassett because Oklahoma State had an opportunity with the Ferrari legacy, right, to have all three brothers, and it was going to be this big thing for John Smith. Obviously, it did not work out in our favor. So I feel like there's a recreation moment for Bo Bassett in that same, breadth of conversation. And for that reason, I think Penn State probably does have the leg up, and geographically it's going to be beneficial. Clearly, family dynamics are very important to this recruiting process for Bo. For all those reasons, I think Penn State probably does have the edge here, and Oklahoma State seemingly we feel pretty squared away for right now, AKA if you were to ask Oklahoma State fans, would you rather have Bo or Jax? I think everybody would agree more or less they would want Jax. But the future of Melvin and the younger brother, that's very intriguing.
Yeah, all three of them are going to go to one destination together. I don't see Bo Bassett going one place, Melvin Miller going another place, and Keegan Bassett going to a completely different destination, or two in one place, one in the other, etc. This is truly a package deal where if you land Bo Bassett, it creates a domino effect where Melvin Miller commits in 2027, and you look at Matt Scouts, Flow Wrestling, Melvin Miller is the consensus #1 prospect in the 2027 class. And credit where credit's due, the recent run that PJ Duke has had on freestyle and defeating Yanni Diakomahalis, one of his biggest opponents, one of his most enticing challengers was Melvin Miller at that U20 US Open, go figure. So yes, Bo Bassett is still a top 5 pound for pound wrestling recruit, but it's also the fact that you could potentially get the #1 pound for pound recruit in 2027. And we'll see where Keegan Bassett ultimately ends up for the class of 2028. It is a little too early. I guess it's never too early for some wrestling fanatics, but in this conversation, but yes, you do take care of a lightweight at 125 or 133 down the road for Keegan Bassett in that 28 class. For Penn State, I do think they need him absolutely much more so than Oklahoma State does. The people that say, there are some people, not a lot, that say, well, he shouldn't go to Penn State, or if you're Penn State, you shouldn't want him. You absolutely want Bo Bassett. as an individual wrestler. Even without Melvin Miller or Keegan Bassett attached to this recruitment, you would want Bo Bassett. Remember, he is not a fringe wrestler. This is a top 5, conservatively speaking. Some people still look at him as the number 1 prospect. I say it's Jax Forrest and Jaden James, and then there's an argument that he's maybe 3 or 4th. I think he's gone down a couple of spots, but you absolutely take this commitment. You want to, and I know very well that Penn State is going to push for this commitment because you don't want him to end up at Oklahoma State for a variety of reasons.
Well, yeah, you kind of stole it while I was dying temporarily and swallowing a frog. Thanks for taking that segue there. I think that it's imperative for Penn State to land Bo, because Oklahoma State, if you were to get this commitment and then you line up the potential of Melvin Miller and the younger Bassett, I think that the days of Penn State controlling college wrestling would be officially over. However, Penn State lands Bo and you get the Melvin Miller and the whole trickle-down effects, I do think that it creates a much more interesting dynamic between Oklahoma State and Penn State moving forward. This next year, maybe still Penn State's, but the years following that are going to be very interesting. I feel like Oklahoma State's success over the next 4 or 5 years has nothing to do with Bo. As opposed to if Penn State doesn't land Bo, it feels like all of the momentum is heading towards Stillwater nationally.
And especially with this follow-up class. Look, Penn State in 2024 and 2025 had iconic classes, generational classes, and that's why you see Oklahoma State following it up with what's gone down in 2026. Jax Forrest, the Rainey twins. I've lost count. Did they have 5 of the top 10 pound-for-pound recruits?
You nailed it.
All right.
50%,
so it is
50% is pretty good clip last I checked.
Yes.
Well, and you mentioned the younger weights. What Ren Sakamoto just did recently, Tech falling his way to being able to represent Team Japan in the U20s, that we're in a pretty good spot. But for momentum purposes, if you want to get Oklahoma State back to where it used to be, which was the juggernaut of college wrestling, then you do kind of make these Bo kind of moves. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, I know one of the biggest things for Bo Bassett in this recruitment is he wants to start right away. He doesn't want a red shirt. If he has to, okay, we'll see. But I know that he wants to come in and compete and start if he wins that battle.
Yeah, but Iowa's the best chance for that to happen. That's what's kind of crazy about all this. If that's what he wants to do is come in as a true freshman and get on the mat right away, it's probably going to be at Iowa. It's not going to be at either Oklahoma State or Penn State, in my personal opinion.
It is more realistic at Penn State than Oklahoma State. I think that's true. I mean, I don't know the outlook at 141 and 149. Please explain.
Well, yeah, taking Jameson, it's going to be contingent upon the weight issue. Same could be said to some degree about Teague Travis, but both of those individuals are more than capable of getting some massive things done. We also have J.J. McComas still down there. I just mentioned Ren Sakamoto. He's likely going to stay at that 25, 33-ish range, but you never know. There could be potential options for bumping up. And then D. Lockett, right, he's not going to factor into those weights, but what is Jax Forrest going to be at? Right, I know we got a little bit of time for the Jax conversation. Yeah, there's a lot playing in David Taylor's favor. So I don't think we're necessarily concerned. But again, I think this is bigger to do with the future of what it could potentially be with Melvin and Keegan as well.
I think Bo Bassett has maybe not as immediate as an outlook as he would like. But 149 opens up immediately after Shane Van Ness. Okay. Yeah. If he thinks he can come in and do not necessarily the unthinkable, but clearly unlikely, that a 6th-year veteran in college who has been around being a title contender, he's not a title favorite, title contender. Caleb Henson's the only guy standing in his way this season, for example. But to think that Bo Bassett could come in and win that hypothetical battle, in theory, he could. I do think they're on a level playing field, but I got to imagine that Van Ness holds down that spot for one season. And that's where, okay, if you're Bo Bassett, are you willing to swallow your pride, take a necessary red shirt, which I think would benefit any wrestling prospect just for the fact of the matter. And then you can be unleashed for 4 years, no obstacles, as the guy at 149 at Penn State, the school that is in your home state.
You could probably come up with very many downsides to NIL. This is probably the biggest, is people wanting to come in and start immediately. Traditionally speaking, more often than not, when you went through recruiting, you kind of look forward to a redshirt year. Put on 15, 16, 17 pounds of muscle, right? Get a little bit stronger, faster.
Just learn.
Yes. But nowadays, it's not the case. Kids want to play right away, even if they're not ready. And if they don't play right away from NIL dollars, they're going to go get it elsewhere. So it's a darned if you do, darned if you don't time of recruiting.
All right, let's give our thoughts on Iowa and what the chances are for Nebraska as well, because they weren't originally in his, top 7?
Yeah.
Definitely not his top 4, but now this new top 3 has Penn State, Oklahoma State, and Nebraska. Will pick back up with the Cornhuskers and what the heck happened with Iowa. That is coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. Are you new to FanDuel? Well, new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, and to use on all the sports I just mentioned, anything, even WNBA as well, any summer sports. Also, football in the offseason. That's right. You can bet on Penn State and Oklahoma State. In the offseason, win totals are posted on FanDuel right now. Do you think Penn State's going to have more or less than its win total? Do you think Oklahoma State's going to have more or less on its win total? You can follow the action and keep up with it. And if you are new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and you will get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's all over at FanDuel. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That is via the FanDuel app or FanDuel.com/lockedon. The Nebraska factor. How serious do we think the Cornhuskers are? I will consider them a legitimate wild card here. I don't think they're in here by accident, because notice how he didn't go back to 75% of his original top 4. Obviously, Iowa's out and Melvin Miller took Iowa out of his new top 8. Yep. So there's that too. But Virginia Tech did not go in there. I thought Michigan was kind of always, or Rutgers was going to be a silent contender in this recruitment, and they're not. And Nebraska made a statement at last year's NCAA tournament. They finished second. They had 3 finalists. They had 2 champions. PJ Duke beat both of them in the freestyle circuit. Just want to remind everybody. But Nebraska, it is here to play ball. They are serious. I think Mark Manning is doing a heck of a job. I still think there's a gap between themselves and Penn State. I would take Nebraska over Oklahoma State this season. Anybody else? There's a clear number 1 and 2 dynamic for Penn State and Nebraska this season. I'll let everybody else decide 3 through 12, if you will. And we'll talk about that in segment 3. But I do not discount Nebraska for getting into the mix here. Just better late than never, I suppose.
I'm sorry. Did I hear you just say that Nebraska is going to finish number 2 this upcoming season? Is that what?
I would think so. They returned just about everybody except Ridge Lovett and Caleb Smith.
I think Manning is absolutely phenomenal. I think what they did this last season speaks volumes. Clearly, what this shows from Bo is there's a little bit of a what have you done for me lately aspect to this. And I think from an NIL perspective, Nebraska does have money, right? So they're never going to be completely out of the woodworks. And they made a massive statement this previous season. However, I will also say that now you have year 2 under David Taylor. You have a bigger, better version of RTC now than you had coming into this previous season. So I think developmentally, Oklahoma State should be able to surpass Nebraska this season.
Yes.
And for that, I will also say this is why I don't consider Nebraska serious contenders here, because I would imagine that part of Bo's outlook in the next 4 years is to A, win a national title, and B, win a national title with his brother on the same roster. That's not going to happen at Nebraska. Not maybe an individual national title he can win at Nebraska, but they're not winning a team title anytime soon with Oklahoma State and Penn State still in the way. Miraculous season. Manning's doing a phenomenal job, but we just witnessed David Taylor year 1 with acquisitions being kind of late, and half of those acquisitions were not his. You know what I mean? Some of the guys that we watched wrestle this previous season weren't his dudes. David Taylor probably would have not brought a couple of those guys in if he would have got the job sooner. So I feel like he didn't have the roster that he wanted and still made a lot of massive waves with it. This is the roster he wants. This is an RTC program that is developing the roster that he wants. So Nebraska, I think it does make sense. They had a phenomenal run. They have a phenomenal coach, but they're not on the same hemisphere as Oklahoma State and Penn State personally. And I'm offended that you think Nebraska is going to finish ahead of Oklahoma State this upcoming season. As for Iowa, man, bro, I don't know what the conversations are in the Tom Brand's land, but if there was any trepidation about him returning and maybe sprinkling in some Spencer Lee, that conversation is about to go crazy through the roof. I didn't have the opportunity to jump on Iowa message boards last night, but I really wanted to. Too bad the Thunder were too busy winning the title. Otherwise, I would have. Yeah, I'm sure that's an interesting time happening in Iowa. They needed this. They just fell into the basement, basically, right? You mentioned Nebraska.
Yeah,
I think now you have the conversation that Nebraska could definitely finish above Iowa for the foreseeable future in wrestling.
If we're talking about long-term outlook, I definitely think it's Penn State, Oklahoma State. But for the 25-26 season, Nebraska should be, in theory, the favorite to be second place. Just at this present moment.
Big in, buddies. I got it. I get it. I'm tracking.
But yes, Iowa dropped this badly. So let's and again, I want to preface this, allegedly speaking, right? We saw reports released from Pat Minio that the Bassett family was mistreated, that the Brands brothers or Tom Brands had yelled and had a very rough conversation, particularly with Mrs. Bassett, that there were clearly some disagreements. Let's say that. Okay, so we can clearly state that Bo Bassett and company wanted to, as they should, train with Iowa and the RTC. What the travel costs and everything else were, that's where the disagreement is, okay, because it's he said, she said type of situation, okay? There's a lot. Who was at fault for this entire situation? I totally understand the Bassetts wanting to be a part of the RTC, and that is Iowa's biggest detriment right now. Cody, what was one of the first things we initially talked about when this move happened with David Taylor in Oklahoma State? That he was going to solidify and build out the RTC. The reason Oklahoma State is going to be able to compete with Penn State, not tomorrow, not the next year or the year after that necessarily, in my opinion, but down the road, be a lot more respectable in this competition to be closer, is because he's starting with the RTC. You need a foundation and you go from there. What is Iowa's RTC? What is the Hawkeye RTC? It's Spencer Lee, maybe Austin DeSanto, and nobody else. And when Bo Bassett and Melvin Miller and Keegan Bassett had that reality check, like, oh, it's just us. It's just Spencer Lee and nobody else. Yep. That is truly the core of the issue here, that they realize their future outlook did not, because they want to compete. That's why Oklahoma State is really, because Nebraska, I think similarly doesn't have as strong of an RTC. They have a good RTC, but not as strong. I would put them closer to Iowa than I would Penn State and what Oklahoma State is doing at this present time. Right. So the Bassetts realized that and said, we need to go somewhere else. And then you obviously have, if there were any verbal disagreements or confrontations, that's not going to go over well. But that's what happened. There was a boiling point here, and you also have the alleged NIL investments. So this was really a tense moment here, and I'm not surprised it went down this way.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're paying football money for an individual, like you could find complications within that somewhere along the way.
Money doesn't solve everything,
right? Well, and you mentioned the RTC, right? Jordan Burroughs had an interview recently where he talked about the benefit of Oklahoma State is you can be a 5-year-old going through wrestling in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. You can go to Stillwater High and still stay involved with Oklahoma State wrestling. You can go to Oklahoma State, compete for natties, and then stay at Oklahoma State while you go compete to wrestle in the Olympics. You can have an entire career from 5 years old to 50 years old in Stillwater right now with the way things are. Penn State's obviously the same way, because you guys built that mindset. You guys built the platform that David Taylor is utilizing successfully in Stillwater. So why Iowa wouldn't take advantage of that, I don't understand. And more importantly, if you're going to spend football money, why are you worried about travel for somebody to come compete at your center? Somebody that can compete and help recruit. Like, Iowa dropped the ball here, man. So much so that there might be a lot of the Spencer Lee needs to take over conversations happening, because it seems as though you've got Penn State, of course, Then you've got, okay, I'll give you Nebraska's right there, Oklahoma State.
Presently.
But then correct. But for the foreseeable future, it's trending that Oklahoma State's going up. Penn State's staying pretty much the same. Nebraska's definitely going up. Iowa's not going up.
No.
This is a problem for them, in my opinion.
No, this is a huge domino effect because this is where we will finish and then go, we'll talk about the present with the 25 and 26 season, but Iowa continually relies on the transfer portal. Yes, they're still doing, Michael Mako is committed. Leo DeLuca, right? There is Angelo Ferrari's. Yeah. People were saying, hey, Angelo Ferrari's not going to stay there all 4 years, whatever have you. They still have promising prospects at the end of the day, but they still rely too much on the transfer portal for plug and play. Well, Oklahoma State does that too. David Taylor just took over. He had
no choice.
Yes, he has no choice. But Iowa, the Brands brothers have been doing this for some time, and it's, let's go play wrestling's version of free agency to try and win. And you broke that a little bit by getting Bo Bassett, because Bo Bassett was going to bring the family. Bassett was going to bring friends. He meant it when he said, we are going to create a Pennsylvania to Iowa pipeline. And that was a concern of mine at the time. Well, that's not going to happen now. You undo all of that one way or another. It is a bad look. I still think Iowa is going to be able to get really good recruits because they do have a strong NIL. They still have a strong NIL. You are going to free up some NIL with Bo Bassett and everybody else going somewhere else, obviously. Yeah. However, there is, like I said, there is this, the calls, the conversation continues to be unsupportive of the Brands brothers rather than championing him. Aside from the margin is growing wider of people that don't support him or publicly say, hey, maybe this isn't the right move anymore, versus people that are like, 5, 10, 15 more years of this.
I hope Iowa sticks doing precisely what they're doing. I think
helps you.
It's great for us. Yeah, exactly.
I
will say that I hate to hear some of this about Brands because, seeing John Smith retire hurt my heart.
Yeah.
Seeing Brands get pushed out, being like one of the biggest legends in the history of wrestling. That's not a good look for collegiate sports in general, but at the same point in time, this is a new era. Right. And there's coaches that are having a difficult time making the adjustment. Mike Gundy could be one of those. Up until this year, you can make the argument that Mike Gundy was having a difficult time making the adjustment in the new NIL transfer market era. So it's not for everybody. And Brands seemingly lost out on Drayshawn Ross out of his backyard, lost out on Jax Forrest. Next thing you know, there's a bunch of big dollar bills happening. Bo Bassett is making his announcement, which means he's probably going to get the whole family. And now this happens. It's just, I don't know. It's hilarious, but also sad at the same time.
Adapt or get left behind. So we'll see. Again, there are Iowa supporters that say, this is still the right thing. And to each their own. Again, some people are going to say that, the Bassett family was mistreated here and there should have been more respect, or that, no, this is blown out of proportion. Again, this is all alleged. I'm not here to take a stand. But one way, if Brands did act in that manner, we can all agree that, this isn't necessary. Or if that's not the case and that maybe the Bassett family was overreacting to the situation, then we can all agree on that. But until there is somebody that can corroborate a story, I can't take a side. Just know that this was extremely mishandled in some sort of capacity. And there was clearly a miscommunication, whether it was compliance or anything else like that. This was mishandled, and this was a top iconic prospect in this class.
Bye-bye, Hawkeye.
So now let's pivot back to the present, not focus so much on the future here, as 2025-2026 is going to be extremely favorable for Penn State. The lineup, national championship favorite, the depth chart that is behind them, and where does Oklahoma State play into all of this? Could they make a push to be in that top 3 once again? We're going to talk about it coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. All right, let's finish up with the immediate future here, as we're not too far from the wrestling season. Yes, it's the later part of June, but 2025-26 season will be here before we know it. Penn State, I can declare as a national championship favorite again. Nebraska is going to be a challenger here, but I still see Penn State winning 7 or 8 of those bouts in theory when you put the lineups right next to each other at full strength side by side. Oklahoma State, I've seen people rank them as a fringe top 10 team. So, Cody, I'm eager to get that inside perspective from you as where the Cowboys actually stand, because they did have to make some additions through the transfer portal. You did acquire Zach Ryder in the process. You know, that's a great addition and makes a lot of sense with everything that happened with Rocco Welsh there. So I am eager to see, because I think Oklahoma State will be better as the season goes along. This is a young team that has wrestlers potential that has still not been tapped into. So those teams usually start slow and finish very strong. I don't buy that Oklahoma State is a fringe top 10 or maybe early on, but by the time the postseason rolls around, which really matters the most, I could easily see them probably in the top 5 battling for that 4th or 5th spot.
I mean, I had not seen us outside the top 10 entering the season. I think that would be a pretty preposterous number.
I've seen them at 8 pretty consistently.
Okay. I mean, maybe. And there is some roster turnover. Obviously, Wyatt Hendrickson is gone. Dean Hamady Jr. is gone. But as is Caleb Fish, who didn't get recruited by David Taylor. Neither did Cam Amin, which were from a scoring perspective. Both of those individuals did not do, in my opinion, what David Taylor looked for them to do. That is going to be a difference in this class. You mentioned the Penn State guy. We also got Casey Swiderski over from
great
Iowa
addition.
State. He's a bad mamma jamma. Figueroa was a national champion. If he can come to Oklahoma State, we talk about development.
Yeah.
If the Zahid Valencias and the Roman Bravo Youngs and the Dayton Fixes of the world can get the most out of Figueroa, I think that could change the game as well. The higher weights are going to be a little problematic, as you mentioned, throughout the course of the season. But I think people like Cody Merrill are definitely able to do some pretty miraculous things.
He'll get better as the season goes along.
Yeah. And Connor Doucette, right? Connor Doucette a few years ago was a big-time recruit coming out of high school that had his opportunities to go anywhere. And if he's been developing behind guys like Wyatt Hendrickson and Luke Serber, then I feel like we're probably in decent shape. And lastly, I will say the only team in the country who's going to have the developmental RTC training stuff that we have is Penn State, right? So you mentioned that's why everyone's going to get better, because as the season progresses, these are actually David Taylor's guys that he wanted from a scoring points perspective. Then you have Tegan Jamison back. You have Teague Travis back. You have Ren Sakamoto doing some miraculous things. You have Troy Spradley back as well. I feel like this roster is more complete than obviously some people are projecting.
All right, so let's go through immediate national title contenders or guys that will most likely make the deepest postseason runs for this upcoming season. When I look at Penn State's lineup, Luke Lillidahl, Marcus Blaze will be top 4. And again, the lineup isn't, I feel like Oklahoma State's lineup is a little more of a sure thing, even though they have more changes to go through. You can project, okay, he's the best. He's going to go right in. 133 is not a certain thing because it could be Ono. It could be Blaze. 141, it could be Ono. It could be Blaze. It could be Braden Davis. It could be Aaron Nagao for all we know. At 149, Shane Van Ness, title contender. 157, it could be Tyler Kasak. It could be PJ Duke. Either way, title contender. 65, Messenbrink, title favorite. 74, Haynes, title favorite. 84, Rocco Welsh, title contender because 84 is so loaded. But I do think he's closer to the top than an Angelo Ferrari and a Max McAnally. I don't think that's a crazy take to say that Rocco Welsh should be the 1A, B, and C between those 3 wrestlers. And Aiden Sinclair obviously deserves his due respect. 197, Josh Barr, title favorite at 97. And then at heavyweight, I'm not going to sit here and declare that Cole Mirasola is going to be a title, but he will get better as the season goes along. I think he can be an All-American, maybe sneak into the semifinals, but I wouldn't say it is likely at this point in time. I need to see more from him. Luke Lillidahl, I don't know if I mentioned him, title favorite. So when I look at Oklahoma State's lineup, Troy Spradley, title contender.
There you go.
Tegan Jamison, title contender.
Yes, sir.
Zach Ryder, again, I should have mentioned him in that group, title contender. 184 is going to be absolute cinema. but you're going to have to help me out here with Oklahoma. Richie Figueroa, title contender. So there's what, 3 or 4, but no title favorites, I would say.
Yeah, no title favorites. I think you could throw D. Lockett into that equation as well. You could throw Alex Facundo into that conversational piece as well.
Okay.
We don't have any title favorites, right? That's our closest would probably be Troy Spratley. But
Yes.
again, the competition that we have between Sidursky and Facundo is going to be absolutely phenomenal, even if they're a little bit different weight sets. You have Tegan Jameson. A fully healthy Tegan Jameson showed you what he could do. He only wrestled, 11 matches all year. They all just happened to be right at the very, very end of the season. So nationally, people got a little glimpse of what Tegan Jameson could be if healthy. Teague Travis has had some massive wins in his career. His problem has been bouncing around weights too often to really, tie down to one particular area. Figueroa, I do think, could be a national champion once again in Stillwater with the developmental aspects. And then the heavier weights are going to be probably the factor that may get a little interesting, right? I don't know a lot about the heavier weights, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend otherwise. But I think when you look at somebody like Cody Merrill and Connor Doucette that were heavily recruited, if they're getting the development that you think that they're getting, because when you look at Zahid Valencia, his development has been absolutely massive. I think you could make the argument that Roman Bravo Young has even improved somewhat significantly over the last couple of years in Stillwater. If we get some of that out of the upper weights, we'll have a national championship competition level team.
Well, there you have it on this Locked On crossover that is certainly going to have more conversations between the Penn State and Oklahoma State side. So thank you so much to each and every one of you for checking out this crossover episode. My name is Zach Seyko, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Cody Stovall, the host of Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily source for everything Nittany Lions and Poke related. So if you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and wherever you get your podcast, let us know your thoughts down in the comment section, whether it's about Bo Bassett, how Iowa handled this, and early thoughts on both of Penn State's and Oklahoma State's lineups. Cody, thanks so much for the time, and can't wait to catch up again in the not too distant future.
Hey, before we leave, I do have to say I saw your deal on Twitter. I wanted to argue, but you actually do have the best OC and DC combination in the country. I will throw that out there.
I appreciate that.
We missed Jim Knowles in Stillwater so deeply.
Appreciate that. But as always, Cody, thank you so much for the time, and always enjoy talking wrestling with you.
Absolutely.